OPB Podcasts.
It's OPB Politics Now for Thursday, June 4th. In late May, Southwest Washington was struck by tragedy. 11 people died and others were injured when a chemical tank ruptured at a paper mill in Longview. Now the town is picking up the pieces and asking what happened. But when or if answers are coming has been an open question. President Trump has long tried to kill the agency that's investigating. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB Politics reporter Dirk VanderHart.
I'm OPB Politics reporter Lauren Dake.
And I'm Erik Neumann, the Southwest Washington Bureau Chief for OPB.
Erik, as you just mentioned, you are OPB's Southwest Washington Bureau Chief. Great to have you on the podcast. You were on the scene in Longview not long after this catastrophic failure on May 26th. I think let's just start by telling us a bit about this facility and what we know happened that morning.
Sure. So it was at a paper mill called the Nippon Dynawave Packaging Company in Longview, which is a pulp and paper facility there. And there was a large tank of chemicals that ruptured. It was this big tank, kind of like a grain elevator silo type thing, that it holds 900,000 gallons of chemicals, 500,000 gallons spilled out of it. And the chemical that was involved is this really caustic chemical that's called white liquor, which is used in the papermaking process. I've heard it described as like very concentrated bleach. And it resulted in 11 employees dying and multiple other people who were injured. So investigators have just referred to it as a blast or a rupture or something like that. So the specific cause, whether it was an explosion or an implosion, is kind of unknown right now. The investigation has been delayed because it took a long time to recover the bodies of the victims in this accident. So investigators weren't really able to fully do their investigating. But now that that has happened, which was completed over the weekend, they're starting to really begin that investigation.
And we are here talking today, 9 days after this incident, an incident Governor Bob Ferguson in Washington has said was the most deadly industrial incident in Washington of the modern era. All of the people who were killed, as you said, have been recovered. We know their names now. Who were they? I mean, what do we know about these folks?
They ranged in age from 26 to 58. Two of them were brothers. They were all union members. It's hard to talk about without getting emotional. They were just all members of the community, whether it was Longview, Kelso, other neighboring communities in Cowlitz County.
Yeah, and one of the things that we have also learned is that just the timing of this was really bad. I think this was 7:15 or so. A shift change was underway, so more people apparently were at the plant than would otherwise been, and maybe even meeting right by this tank that ruptured.
Right. Yeah, that's what we've heard so far, that there was like an above average number of people who were there, which just makes it that much more tragic.
You know, one of the things about this tragedy that, I mean, I've just learned a lot more about paper making, I guess, than I would have otherwise. Lauren, you know, one of the things you did after this happened was look into that chemical Erik mentioned, white liquor, what it does, why it's used. It does not sound like pleasant stuff, but help us understand what it's used for in sort of the paper making process.
Yeah. Okay. So one person I spoke with described it really well for me. She basically said she likened this whole process to like cooking in a pressure cooker. So, instead of, say, meat, you put the wood in the pressure cooker, you put in a bunch of different chemicals, you close it, you heat it up, you cook it under this pressure. And in this case, it causes the wood to disintegrate. And you get this new material that you're looking for, which is this white liquor. It's corrosive, it's caustic, like Erik said. You do not want to interact with it because it's dangerous. And the whole process is called craft pulping, craft with a K. So, yes, I learned a lot of new terms while reporting this story. Anyway, that white liquor was what was apparently inside this tank that, like Erik mentioned, we don't know, what happened, but we think, or that, people I've spoken with think it looks like the tank seemed to have imploded rather than exploded.
Yeah.
One person I spoke with was this guy, Stephen Chemotek. He's a professor of chemical engineering, and he suggested maybe there was a relief valve on top of this massive tank that could have been plugged and caused the tank to collapse. And well, here's how he described it himself.
Picture a plastic water bottle, those real thin-walled plastic water bottles. And you put your mouth over it and start drinking, but you have a good seal on that opening. What I believe could well have happened in this case is they were pulling out, but there was no way for air or something else to backfill that volume as they were sucking material out of it. And so it collapsed, just like that water bottle.
And, like Erik mentioned, this is very much being investigated. We don't know for sure, but that is what several people have said so far. This chemical engineer also said that unlike industrial tank explosions, it's really rare to see an implosion. And that's, I don't know, I guess it was striking to me that this whole process of craft pulping has apparently been around for more than a century, and it's changed very little in that time. So it's funny, it's something that we've never heard of, and now it seems like, we're learning a lot about. The big change that we've seen over the years is just the number of paper mills in the U.S. dwindling to something like 128 left here, with the majority of the 4,500 that still exist being somewhere else internationally.
And I think that water bottle analogy is really, really helpful. I mean, it certainly jibes with the visuals we saw out of Longview that day, where you see this huge tank that has kind of crumpled in. It doesn't look like debris is scattered far and wide. It just kind of looked like it's crumpled like that. You were part of a story that OPB published over the weekend, Lauren, that I thought was really, really just helped me understand this a lot more and get to the bottom of what might have happened. But we don't know exactly what happened. And obviously, there are huge questions. There are going to be huge questions. For those listeners who are listening and maybe asking themselves why OPB's Politics podcast is delving into an industrial tragedy, this is why. Because the federal agency that looks into chemical spills and has for decades has been fighting for its existence in the Trump administration. Lauren, what is happening with this Chemical Safety Board?
Yeah, okay, so just to take a little half step back first, shortly after this implosion, a team of investigators from this Chemical Safety Agency arrived in Longview at the scene of this paper mill. And these investigators, they go all over the country when there's some kind of chemical incident. And I spoke to a retired former investigator with this agency, and he said that, investigators will look at the construction of the tank. They'll look for cracks. They'll look for corrosion. They'll comb through maintenance records. They'll look for equipment errors. They'll interview employees, managers, engineers. And their goal is really find out the root cause of what happened here, identify any systemic issues that could exist, and figure out what could have prevented this so nothing happens like this again in the future. And the Trump administration has really tried to wipe out the bulk of the funding for this agency. And it's interesting because it is a tiny agency. I mean, the annual budget is $14 million.
Yeah.
That's million. I mean, that's like a rounding error when it comes to federal budgets.
Yep.
And I guess reportedly it feels like the Trump administration said they feel like this agency like duplicates existing efforts. So with OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. But some of the former Chemical Safety Board members I spoke with said that's really not the case. They said the EPA is looking into whether the environmental rules were violated, like whether there's something still out in the community that could harm people. OSHA's looking at workplace standards, whether there were employer failures that contributed to this. This Chemical Safety Board is the agency that looks holistically at what happened and then comes up with reports that they put in a public report that everyone can read.
Yeah, they're not like issuing fines like an OSHA might. They are just truly looking at what happened and how can chemical safety be better moving forward.
How do we prevent this in other places? They're supposed to be an independent, nonpartisan agency. They're already pretty small.
Yep.
And then, they issue a public report, and that's their mission.
And the reporting I have seen, I haven't checked this myself, is that Trump has tried to zero out this agency's funding budget after budget, I mean, repeatedly, and been sort of, that's been parried away by Congress to date.
Since he first took office, apparently.
Yeah. So that brings us to the next point, which is, there has been this effort. I think an early version of the budget had slashed the agency's funding. As of yesterday, it sounds like there has been some agreement struck that is going to keep the agency whole. What do we know about this?
Yeah, well, so last night or yesterday at some point in the day, we heard that Democratic Representative Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, who represents the region in Congress, convinced her colleagues on the House Appropriations Committee to adopt this amendment that would restore the agency's funding. It is part of a larger, overall, massive spending bill.
Right.
I think it seems like it's good news for the agency, but, it's not a done deal, and Congress is unpredictable. So we'll keep an eye on it.
It is, yeah. I mean, it sounds like there is, especially after what happened in Longview, a recognition among politicians that this would be a pretty bad look. There is a pretty devastating situation happening to zero out this agency. Probably a bad time for that. So as I understand it, these investigations take months or years, right? This investigation has just started. It doesn't currently look like the agency is going to be hamstrung or outright eliminated. As you say, Lauren, Congress is unpredictable. But back to the ground in Longview. Erik, you have spent time in that community recently as folks are grappling with what happened, what it means for the future. You had a really good story on OPB's air this morning about that. Just help us understand what you've seen, what you're hearing from people.
Yeah, so I was at a fundraiser that was a barbecue on Saturday, which there's been a number of kind of different events that people have pulled together on really short notice to try to raise money, mainly for the families of the victims in this accident. So I think the two takeaways for me from this was that the community is very connected to the victims. The Longview, Kelso area is, relatively small. It seems like everybody is kind of like 1 or 2 degrees removed from somebody who's been affected by this accident. And then the other is that there's just concerns about what this could mean for the industry, for the mills. So paper mills are very just ingrained in the Longview, Kelso community. It's the Nippon Mill is a big employer. I think they have 550 employees. And one person that I spoke to put it in kind of a succinct way about just concerns about what the effects of this major accident could have on this industry, but then also just the paper and wood industry as a whole in that area.
The logs are either going to the export yard or they're going to the sawmill, and then the residuals out of the sawmill are going to the paper mill to be made into paper. So when we lose a mill like that, it has a huge economic impact in town here. I mean, you can drive out here and you can see they're dumping chips in places they don't normally dump chips because the sawmill needs to keep running, and if the chips stack up, they can't run. So I mean, it's just it's a whole ecosystem basically. So I mean, yes, every paper mill in this town is a huge asset to the town. So I mean, yeah, this tragedy, while the most affected are the people who lost loved ones, economically it's going to trickle down to the whole town.
And that's Terry Carlson, who's the president of the Cowlitz-Wahkiakum Central Labor Council. It's a union representation organization. They're raising money for the families right now, too. But his point was just, there's concerns about what could happen to this paper mill as a result of this accident, and then kind of how that could affect the broader community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of your other reporting, I mean, you really get to just the magnitude of it. You've talked about how ingrained this place is, but you spoke with a guy that said, this is going to be felt for 50 years. This is something that people are going to talk about for decades. I mean, the Nippon tragedy or whatever it'll be known as. Is
there was comparisons to the Mount St. Helens eruption, which I thought was kind of interesting just when you think about this in the timeline of that community.
And you mentioned everyone has a 1 or 2 degree of separation from this thing. I mean, one thing that's become very clear that or I guess really driven that home is that there are a number of elected officials that have current direct ties to the Nippon Dynawave plant or former direct ties, right? What have we learned about that?
So a couple people that were at the initial press conferences after this incident happened. One was Brian Wood, who's a representative with Nippon. He's also a city councilor in Kelso, which is the town next to Longview. Jeff Wilson was also there. So Wood works at Nippon. Jeff Wilson was also at these press conferences. He's a state senator for the 19th legislative district. He used to run a company that operated on the mill site doing sort of like maintenance and cleaning up of these chemical tanks. Those are two people that, have specific, who are in elected office right now and have specific work past with this facility. Yeah. But then to kind of zoom out on the bigger level, Lauren mentioned Marie Glusenkamp-Perez. Much of her platform is focusing on the skilled trades. Mm-hmm. So she's been there extensively since this happened, talking with the families, talking about ways to make sure that pay for the employees who are sort of now out of work for the time being continues, and then making sure that the funding for this appropriation for the Chemical Safety Hazard Investigation Board is still funded.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the state senator, Wilson, said he had been in the tank before via the work he'd been doing. So just, hard to get more immediate than that. Yeah. We will leave it there for today. Erik, I know you'll continue following this. I'm not sure if that reporting will end up on the Politics Podcast, but thanks so much to both of you for being here. This week's episode of OPB Politics Now was recorded live in the Gert Boyle studio. It was produced by Andrew Thien, and our audio engineer is Layla Isbell. Our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting, as always, at opb.org. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.